Welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I am John Charles, and today the Poison Pen is doubly delighted to have with us two bright new shining stars in the mystery firmament, authors Celeste Connally and Deborah J. Benoit. I hope I got that right. Celeste's new book is All's Fair in Love and Treachery, and Deborah's debut mystery is The Gardener's Plot. I'm sorry, The Gardener's Plot. The Poison Pen does have copies of both authors' books available for purchase. If you'd like one, just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen. We would be happy to connect you with these truly wonderful reading experiences. Now I'd like to welcome Deborah and Celeste.
Thank you so much.
It's so nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. My first question for both of you is, what can you tell us about Deborah and Celeste before you became published authors? Because I'm always fascinated. Authors don't just appear, like Athena out of Zeus's head. There's some backstory to their life. So who was Deborah and who was Celeste before you became published? We'll start with you, Deborah.
Well, I spent 30 years as a legal secretary, so there wasn't a lot of time for writing in between things, though I did manage to do some. I was born and raised in the Berkshires of Western Massachusetts, which I absolutely adore. Let's see, over the years, I have worked as a freelance feature writer for a small local weekly newspaper. I have had some short stories published, and more recently, I do garden writing through the University of Vermont Extension Service, the Master Gardener program. So I still managed to write, though not as much until I retired. And then I started to focus on my novel.
Celeste, who were you before you became published?
Well, I was in the journalism world. I was a journalism major in college and went on to do freelance writing and editing, mostly for educational publishing houses and freelance, articles and whatnot. Which was a blast, and I absolutely loved it. And then I was working for it was a medical journal, and medical journals are peer reviewed, and they move to wherever the actual editor is, whatever doctor that is. And so I was working for the Journal of the American Heart Association, and when I went to work for them, they said this job is just for 1 year. And I thought, what am I going to do after this? Should I go back to school, whatever? And then I thought, ooh, I can start writing my novels. And so yeah, so that's where it all started, and took 13 years to get published, but it was worth it.
My next question for both of you is what your initial path to publication was like. And we'll start with you, Celeste, because you had another series before we experienced Lady Petra.
I did. Yes. So under SC Perkins, the C stands for Celeste. I wrote the Ancestry Detective Mysteries, and I my first one got published because I entered and won the Malice Domestic Best First Traditional Novel Contest, which is through Minotaur Books. And that was in 2017. And my book came out in 2019. And I had three of those novels, which I absolutely loved writing. And then I started on my historical mystery series. And I wanted to go by my middle name and a pseudonym, and my publisher asked if I wanted to do that as well. And so Celeste is my middle name, and Connally is a family name. So that's where it all comes from.
Deborah, after you retired, you decided you wanted to write. What was getting The Gardener's Plot published like as a process?
It was interesting because I wanted to enter the Minotaur Books Mystery Writers of America First Crime Novel Competition, which had a deadline in mid-December. My first day retired was October 1st in 2022. So I wanted to get through and do all the editing and polishing on the manuscript that I could by December. So when December rolled around, I still was, oh, I could fix this, I could do that. What writers do, it's never perfect. But the deadline came and I decided that I had nothing to lose. So I entered the competition and decided that I would not think about it for the next 3 months, because they were supposed to notify winners by the end of March. The end of March came and I hadn't heard anything. So I thought, well, there's always this next year. I can start, take out an old manuscript and start working on it. And I can enter again. Then on April 4th, the phone rang And it was the editor at Minotaur Books telling me that I had won the competition this year. And I was absolutely flabbergasted. I think I babbled incoherently for several minutes, but it's been great. The whole process with editing the manuscript and polishing it to the whole process has been wonderful. I just am so grateful for the opportunity.
Did winning the contest, you may have answered this, but just for clarification, when you win the contest, does that come with a publication guarantee?
It does. You are offered a contract. And of course, if you don't want to sign the contract, you're not going to get published. But it's a standard publishing contract. And it's at that point forward, I'm assuming it's like any other author that's going through the process with the editing and the selection of covers and all the other things that go along with it. But yeah, I think the contract was 42 pages. So
Yeah.
it's
Very
interesting.
daunting. Yes, it was the same for me. So yes, very, very daunting, but yeah, it was exciting to get a publishing contract, and so
It's really prestigious too, because people don't realize how many people apply for these contests, and to be selected, editors are seeing something in that initial work that really shows promise. So that's a credit to you both for having won that award. What do you want readers to know about your new book? And we'll start with you, Celeste.
All's Fair in Love and Treachery is book 2 in my Lady Petra Inquires series. And this one is there's 3 mysteries really happening over 3 days. And it is happening during the 3 days of celebrations that happened in real life in London when London discovered that the Battle of Waterloo had been won. And it actually happened. There was partying in the streets and all sorts of things. And so there is one mystery that's surrounding that, another mystery that's surrounding Petra's heart and her paramour, Duncan Shawcross, and then another mystery set at the Asylum for Female Orphans. So they also intertwine, and it was so much fun to write.
Deborah, what about your debut? What is the Gardener's plot about that readers should know?
Well, in the Gardener's plot, the main character, Maggie Walker, returns to her hometown in the Berkshires. She's had a tough year and she just wants to do a start over. So she's purchased her late grandmother's house. She's working on restoring the garden. She's making new friends, reacquainting with old ones. And one of her new friends invites her to help establish a community garden in town. Well, on opening day, the garden director's a no-show. The gardeners are not very happy with the circumstance, so Maggie steps in and opens up the garden, and they discover a body in one of the plots. So Maggie's drawn into the whole mystery of what happened to the garden director, who's a good friend of hers, and is she involved in the body that was found there? Who's the body, and how did it end up in the garden?
Celeste, is it fair to say that the idea for the Lady Petra series came from television period dramas?
It is very fair. During COVID, when everyone was trying to stay calm and happy, I was binge watching all my favorite period dramas, and I've seen them so many times that I was sort of focusing on different characters, and I started really noticing the unmarried characters, the spinsters, and thinking about how strong they really had to be in real life. And I thought, wow, this would make a great a great heroine, to make her, actually not be married and have to sort of contend with that and then become an amateur sleuth. So absolutely, yes, period dramas are my catnip. So it was fun to do that.
Most mystery series, and I think both of yours are good examples of this, have something around which they anchor the books in the series. A hook, sometimes it's what it's called. In your case, Deborah, it's gardening. I can kind of understand why you chose that given your own background, but can you talk a little bit about what gardening means to those who love it, why you wanted to anchor your mystery around it?
A big part of gardening is coming in contact with nature, taking part in the whole process of growing and and preparing the gardens. And it just seems that while it can be a solitary experience, if you bring other people into it, it gets more interesting. So I was working in the garden, and around here there's a lot of stones in the dirt. It's just a lot of pieces and bits of stones and boulders. And whenever I'm gardening, I'm digging up something unexpected. So I started thinking, what if I dug up something that wasn't just normally expected to be there? So I started thinking along that line, and how maybe it wasn't just a person in their backyard. It was a whole community garden where you could bring a lot of different people together who might not have anything in common except the fact that they want to grow some food or they want to grow some beautiful flowers, and they can work together to do that. Um, so the idea of the plot started to grow from that point. And when I was developing Maggie's character, I knew she was going to be an avid gardener. She has in the past been a master gardener, so she's very much into sharing her knowledge and teaching people about gardening. So it all seemed to very naturally evolve from there.
Whether it was intentional on your part or unintentional, I thought it was brilliant, the idea of community gardens, because cozy mysteries are all about communities, whether it's a small town, whether it's people who a workplace. So in your case, you have these people who are coming together because they share this passion. Can you tell us a little bit, for those that don't garden and don't understand what a community garden is, what exactly are they?
Oh, sure. Gardens are generally on some plot of land where either it's been donated or the um, the gardeners have been allowed to set up shop as it is. There are individual plots. They can be anywhere from a few feet square to very large plots. I think in the gardener's plot, there's something like 6 feet by 8 feet. So they're good sized plots. And gardeners come in and they take their individual plot and they can plant what they want to. There may be rules, like in the case of the garden in my book, they're organic gardening, but sometimes there's the few rules, sometimes there's a lot of rules about what you can grow. And then people come there when they want to. They take care of the gardens. Some people will grow food, and they may have no place to grow at home. They may not have some place that's really suitable for gardening because you need a lot of light to grow vegetables. So people come together. They may have a community plot where everybody works together to grow food to be donated to, say, the local food pantry. So there's a lot of community going on there. And like I said, the people probably don't have a lot in common, except the fact that they love gardening.
Celeste, in your case for the Lady Petra mysteries, I would say probably anchor is the time period, Regency England. What is it about that era that made you think I would definitely want to set my mysteries then?
Well, besides it being a favorite for my love of period dramas, and then Jane Austen. I mean, come on, and I also love the fashion. It's a little just simpler than the earlier Georgian and the very ruffly, tight-laced Victorian. But also the Regency is actually a very short period of time. It's a sub-period of the Georgian period, and it's only from 1811 to 1820, whenever the Prince of Wales, Prince George, was acting as regent for his father, King George. And it was defined by its fashion. It was defined by being a little bit more of a freer time. And that's one of the reasons why I can legitimately put a little bit more romance in my books, because it was a freer time. I mean, there was still the propriety, and still, you had to, as I say, act like a lady and whatnot in it. But there were a lot of people who, enjoyed themselves a little bit more, shall we say, and than in the Victorian times, which was a lot more prudish. And so it's just a fascinating time period, and there was so much going on, and there was a lot of women during that time, the more that I've read, who were pushing boundaries, who were very feminist, and so the more I read about it, the more it's just perfect for a woman to become a headstrong amateur sleuth. And so yeah, it was just the perfect time to choose.
I really appreciate how in Petra you have given readers this example of a different kind of Regency heroine, because I think if you just read a certain number of books, whether they're mysteries or romances or whatever, the idea is that every woman in Regency times wanted to get married, and if you weren't married, then you were a spinster and your total life was over. But you're showing readers that there were other options, and historically that was actually accurate.
It was actually accurate. In fact, if you read Jane Austen, her book Emma was not planning on getting married, and that was, for a woman who had her own fortune, that was an option she could choose. And and Emma said it best. She said, I have my money, I have everything that I need, and and she's of a class where she was not going to be looked down upon, and that is very key here too. And but yeah, so it was something that was an option for a certain class of woman, with her own money. And so but she still faced the stigmas, and so and I think that that was sort of the push and pull that I wanted to have in my books a little bit. So um,
Let's talk a little bit about research involved in writing your books, because I think a lot of times readers think it's fiction, you can make anything up, but you do have to have some degree of truth, of verisimilitude in your stories. Deborah, you have an extensive knowledge of gardening. What kinds of research did you have to do, if any, for your first book?
I think the main research I did outside of making sure everything I said about gardening was accurate, um, I had taken a course offered by our local police department, the Citizens Police Academy. So I got to ask a lot of questions about what would happen if, and got some very good answers from them.
Hmm.
So that was a great source for my research.
Celeste, what about you? Because one of the things I really appreciate about your books is when you write historical mysteries, you walk a line between how much information can you incorporate into the story without it turning into a history textbook. And in the second book, Act Like a Lady, I've lost the All's Fair in Love and Treachery. That's your second book. You have a wonderful way of dropping little historical tidbits into the story that don't pull the reader out, but show how firmly grounded in the period you are. I'm thinking of Petra's meeting with Queen Charlotte, where Charlotte's throwing off comments about Karim,
uh-huh,
the chef there.
uh-huh.
So, so
Uh,
what kinds of research was involved in the second book?
Oh, wow. I try to find little things that are interesting that I want to pull out. And I happen to read about Antonin Karim. And to be fair, and I don't think that I remembered to mention this in my author's note, but he actually does come on the scene a little bit later. But I brought him in for tension and whatnot, and he will show back up in book 3, FYI. And but he was the first celebrity chef, and he was French, and he was a very interesting character. A lot of foods that we eat today are due to Antonin Karim. And but then there are little things like I found an actual document that talked about exactly what happened, because it was written by the hostess who was having the Prince Regent at a ball the night that the news came in about Waterloo. And Major Percy arrived, and people were just crowding around his post foreign chaise. And he drew up in St. James's Park, this house, and ran up the stairs, knelt before the Prince Regent, and said, "Victory, sir, victory," and threw, and had the French flag at his feet. And so stuff like that is, again, just, I mean, my mind just explodes with fun things to write about. And I'm glad that you think that I do it well, because I love all those little tidbits and putting them in and using period correct language and whatnot. And there's a website called Etymology Online that I can go in and type in any word and make certain that it was used during 1815, which stuff like that, I just love it. So it's so much fun to write in.
It's great. And I have to ask, I'm not sure what term you used or how to describe them, but they were like paintings, transparent paintings that Petra's friend sold in her apothecary. What was that a real thing?
It was absolutely a real thing, and it
Yeah.
was well before at this time and well after. What they were paintings that were varnished, so they kind of had a shine to them, a little bit of a clarity to them, and they were made to fit into the pane of one window or two, and you would light a candle behind them, and they would, to somebody passing on the street, it would almost look like a moving picture because they would light up and flicker, and they could be paintings of anything from garden scenes to animals to, the royal family or the Duke of Wellington. And during these 3 days of celebrations, these transparencies were everywhere. So people would walk down the street at night and see them lit up. And it must have just been like a fairy tale land and a little bit kind of a Harry Potter kind of thing going like with the moving images. It must have been a really magical and interesting time, even though it was extremely short lived.
Hmm. Let's talk little bit about the actual process of writing your books. I'm not a writer, but I would imagine as a reader, when you're writing, especially something like a mystery, you need to kind of plan things out in advance because you have to plot suspects, you have to put clues in, there's some structure involved to the story. But I've discovered, much to my surprise, that that's not always the case with authors. So when you sit down to write your books, what does that process look like? And we'll start with you, Deborah.
This is really very much a patchwork because I will start with the opening, and then a lot of times I will jump right to the end, how I want the story to end. And then I have to go back and fill in, okay, what's going to get me from that point to the end? How do I lead up to the person who committed the murder? Do I want to throw another murder in there somewhere? Um, so I have all these little bits, and I will write the main scenes first, and then I will fill in with all the little details, the red herrings, the clues pointing towards the killer. Um, all of the little things get put in at different times. So sometimes when I go back and I do a final read of the manuscript, I go, well, that kind of ended up out in left field somewhere. So I have to go back and fix them. But generally, it's very much a patchwork.
Celeste, what is the process like for you?
Well, I am a pantser, and for anyone listening, there's plotters and pantsers right by the seat of their pants. And luckily no type is more successful than the other, so thank goodness. I tend to start at the beginning and just keep going, and occasionally I will pull out a scene if there's something that's very vivid in my mind. I will pull it out and write it and then slot it back in where it needs to go. And I do, just keep going. I see it sort of as a movie in my mind, and I think about how a movie would go and whatnot, and then lots and lots of revising, obviously, and everything, especially with this one, which has quite a few moving pieces, and so I definitely had to. I was revising right up until the end, but yes, I just kind of go on as it goes, but occasionally I do like Deborah does and everything, and we'll go back in and insert a red herring or say, oh well, this scene just did not work, and rethread it through. So, but yeah, I am a full-on pantser. I write a few notes and maybe do a little bit of a synopsis at first. That's mostly for my agents and my editor, and then I rarely look at it again, which fingers crossed that works for me.
Um, when it came time to write, you have many choices. You could do different genres, historical fiction, contemporary fiction, romance, science fiction, fantasy. Why did you choose mystery as a writer? What is it about this genre that made you think this is what I have to write in? And we'll start with you, Deborah.
I think I chose mystery because I like to be in control of what happens, and I like to make sure everything gets tied up in the end and things all work out the way they should. The bad guy gets punished in one way or another. So mystery seems to do that for me. Other forms, not so much.
Celeste?
I'm very similar. I love the idea of amateur sleuths because I think that there's a little bit in every one of us who really wants to um, solve a mystery or find justice for something. And so I love being able to have my characters make that happen in sort of wish fulfillment a little bit. And I also I think being a mystery author, you just have to be curious about everything that's around you. And I think there's something about writing a mystery that just incorporates that curiosity, just a little bit more than other genres. But I do also love romance too. That's why I always have to put some romance in my books.
You definitely do, Celeste. There is a strong thread through both of your series, contemporary and historical. But also, I'm guessing, but it could be a wrong guess on my part, Deborah, that the little glimmers of romance in your first book may develop a little bit further if you continue with these characters.
I'm working on the second book now, and there is a little bit of conflict as far as the romance goes.
Oh.
That's about all I can really say.
Let's pivot then and talk a little bit about both of you as readers, because writers don't emerge without having some history reading in a certain genre or across genres. What was Deborah like as a reader? What was Celeste like? Were there particular books that were important to you over the course of your reading life? Were you reading just in mysteries, or do you read around the genre? Let's start with you, Deborah.
I started avidly reading science fiction and fantasy. One of my favorite series was The Dragon Riders of Pern. And I think part of what I liked about that was there was always a little mystery buried underneath it about where the people came from and how they got where they were. I, at some point, moved into more mysteries. So I started reading them, and that's where I really started writing fiction, was concentrating in mysteries. I I love series because I hate to let go of a character when the book ends. So writers like Donna Andrews, she has, I think she's on her 42nd or 43rd book in the series now, which is absolutely astounding. Um, but I like that. I like reading Maddie Day. She's got several series. Her country store books are great. It's I like cozies best because they're a great escape from the world that we live in and any kind of stresses. You know that even though the mystery is going to be unexpected, how it unfurls, you know that there's going to be a good ending to it, something satisfying in the end.
Right.
Celeste?
Well, so in my early years, I was lucky enough to have parents who never, uh, you know, took anything away from me and whatever I wanted to read. But I read a lot of books by English authors and whatnot because my mom is an Anglophile as well. And so really when they say like the book that made you and everything, believe it or not, it was not a mystery at all. It was James Herriot, All Creatures Great and Small.
Oh.
And I just the way that he brought that world to life and and everything in his dialogue, I just loved it. And then of course I read Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. I actually gravitated more toward the Hardy Boys. And then Trixie Belden and what Encyclopedia Brown. And then I went to Dick Francis, who is one of my all-time favorites and everything. So, Horse Connection and whatnot. And I'm a huge fan of Donna Andrews. So many of the cozy authors, but I also love a good thriller too. And then of course, my romance books, again, catnip and everything. But yeah, my early reading was a lot of British authors and a lot of mysteries, and and I just absolutely loved it. And so I was always that kid with a book in my hand, kind of thing. So
Deborah, I have a question for you. You finished your first book. It's now been published. You're starting another book. Does it get easier the second time, or is every book a challenge?
No, it's not easier. It's kind of intimidating because the first book was an award winner, so I feel like I have to produce something that's at least as good as that one is. But I don't want to try to do a cookie cutter version of it. I want something that's a little different. So I've tried to do that. The process is still the same, but I think I'm more wanting to revise as I write, which is really a bad thing. So yeah, it's harder.
Celeste, did you find that to be the case? You've written a number of books. Does it get easier, or is every book a different challenge?
Every book is definitely a different challenge, and I absolutely love it. But yes, I mean, having that first book, like Deborah said, be a contest winner, that especially one that was as prestigious, really ramped up the idea of wanting to keep doing better and better. And so, all you can do is just write what makes you happy, and write what thrills you, and hope that it works, and work with your editor and whatnot. And so I've been very, very lucky thus far that my editor has really liked my ideas. But yes, it's definitely a challenge, each one, but the best challenge, I couldn't feel more lucky than to get to do what I do.
Having been an editor in another field in your previous experience, Celeste, does that make it easier to work with an editor now as a mystery writer, or does it present some challenges because you know what to expect on the other end?
Um, it's actually been wonderful, because I know that an editor is there to take something that is hopefully already good or has good bones and make it better. So I actually love being edited, and I don't take any of my past experiences being an editor and put it onto my expectations for my editor, whose name is Hannah. She's wonderful. And I just take what she gives me, and I know that she's there to see it as a fresh point of view, and she's there to make it better. So for me, it's a really wonderful experience, and I haven't had anything but good things to say.
Deborah, now that you're a published author, if you could go back to when you were first starting out, what advice would you give yourself in terms of writing?
Keep writing. Don't let everyday stresses stop you from writing. Just sit down and keep going. Because it was far too easy with a full-time job to get distracted and say, oh, I can write tomorrow or the day after.
We do have a couple questions. Let's slip those in from people who are watching for both of you. The first question is for Celeste and Deborah, and that's how much input do you have to in the physical side of the book, the title, the copy, the cover, things like that? And I'll let either one of you start, whoever would like to.
Well, as um, I've been very, very lucky, and have had it's been a collaboration with all of it. From the beginning, the sketches of the my books, and I mean, Minotaur just does the most amazing covers. And if I want something changed, or whatnot, and if I want something added, and like I had the dog added in this book, and this was something that I thought would be a fun addition. So, and they've been very, very open to it. They generally ask you what your favorite colors are, or if there's, another book that you really, really like the look of. And but they just knock it out of the park every time. So, as far as titles go, it's definitely been a collaboration. I always thought that I'd be that author who comes up with her own titles every single time, but the more books you have, the harder it gets. And so it's really nice to have those other inputs from your agents and your editors, and even friends and family. So, but generally for me, I leave it to my agents and my editors.
Deborah, what about you? The Gardener's Plot is a brilliant title. Was that you, or was that St. Mark?
That was me.
Okay.
That was the original title that I came up with for the book, and they didn't even suggest changing it. As far as the cover goes, I had no expectations about what was going to happen during the publication process, and I was very pleasantly surprised that they sent a proposed cover and said, "Do you like it? Do you approve this?" And when I first looked at it, I'm like, wow, that's not what I would have expected for the cover of the book. But the more I looked at it, the more I said, but that's really a striking cover. I really love it. So it's been really nice to have Minotaur ask my opinions and want to work with me and not just say, okay, here's the cover we're going to put on your book, and this is what we're going to do here. Everything has been, like Celeste said, a collaboration. And it's just been such a wonderful process.
I love your cover too. It's fantastic. I thought they did a great job.
They did, didn't they?
They
Yeah.
did. They really did.
Our next question is also for both of you. This particular viewer asks, are your books available in audio format?
Yes,
Mine are,
indeed.
yeah.
Both of
Um,
you.
and my narrator is absolutely fantastic. So
Do you
love
get
her.
any input into selecting the editor or the narrator? I'm not the editor, the narrator, I'm sorry.
I did, yes. And for my Lady Petra series, I actually kind of got to audition narrators. They had 4 or 5 read a certain passage from my book, and which was the most incredible thing. For my first series, they sent me a list of names that they thought would be good, and then links to books they'd already done. So I got to hear them read other books, which is just as wonderful too. But
Mhm.
having them actually read my a passage from my book was just incredible to see how they all did it slightly differently. And I love the one, her name that I have, her name is Ailey Beaton, and she's actually Scottish, so she can do the Scottish
Duncan.
inflections. Yeah, which I didn't know until I said, "Oh, I love her." But she's just been an amazing narrator. So, and I love audiobooks, so I think they're such a great way to get a book out in a different form.
Hmm. Deborah, did you have any input?
Yes, I was really pleasantly surprised because I didn't expect to be able to have any input into the decision of who would be the narrator in the audiobook. But I was sent, I think, a half a dozen different audition tapes, the same passage from the book. And it was really amazing to listen to them and how each one had their own little spin on it. And I was able to say, well, I'd really like these two. So either one of these are great. And they did end up with going with one of them.
Hmm.
Very
We have
cool.
another person who asks both of you, do you do anything besides writing? I guess, do you have like hobbies or other passions outside writing? Do you have time for it, I guess?
As for me, right now it's travel, and so I am writing full time. If I ever am not able to write full time, then I will go get a job. But for right now, I'm lucky enough to be able to do so. And but right now it's traveling, and then I also love to cook, and I love to garden. I really love being outside, and I just have pots right now and a little garden trug and everything, but that's fun for right now. And so yeah, and if I it's a little too expensive for me at the moment, but if I could, I would have a horse. I used to be a show jumper, and so hence all the horsey things and my books. And so I would absolutely be have a horse if I could. So
Deborah, if I remember correctly, have other creative passions too.
I do. Besides writing and gardening, I paint, draw, I do quilting. Um, I also do research into the family tree, which is time consuming, but it's interesting digging into the past. Um, a lot of little different things, but primarily the artistic pursuits I really enjoy.
I do have a question for Celeste because I thought it was really quite clever. You wrote a little bit about how TV heroines inspired Lady Petra, and I thought, really, that is quite ingenious. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, so I Criminal Element and asked me to write a blog post, and so they wanted to know what inspired her, and so I chose the TV heroines, and so everything from Charlie's Angels in the 1970s, of course, Jessica Fletcher from Murder She Wrote, and Veronica Mars, and and I loved moonlighting, the banter between Maddie and David, and so all of those little things. And there was all of these shows, if even, well back into, the 60s, like what was it? Agent 99 and Maxwell
Oh,
Smart.
get smart.
Get
Yeah.
Smart, yes, and I loved them. And there's really strong heroines in there, and and if you look at it from that lens, it's just amazing. So, and they're very spunky. They've got moxie, which I love that word and everything. And so all of those things I think influence the sort of little modern side of Lady Petra. And so yeah, that was a fun blog post to write.
One of the other things I think that connects both of your mystery series is they're not just about solving the mysteries, they're also about the importance of friendship in the protagonist's lives. In the case of Maggie, she has a circle of friends, one I believe is her neighbor that she's quite close to. And that's really important, not just to solving the mystery, but to her as a character. And of course, Lady Petra has almost a trio of female friends. Can you talk about why you wanted to include friendship in the mystery? And we'll start with you, Celeste.
Oh, well, to me, the idea, I've got a great set of friends, and so the idea that your heroine just can't do everything alone and needs that sort of backup. And a lot of times you have a book, and I love these too, don't get me wrong, but where the heroine goes out on her own and tries to do everything herself. And there's a lot to be said for that, and they're fun to read. And but I loved the idea that Lady Petra has these women, and all three of them are very talented in their own right and have their strengths and weaknesses, and they appreciate each other's strengths. And so that is just, I don't know, to me that was something that was really important to write, especially at this time where having women who understood you and appreciated you even whenever you were taking a different path was really important, and also for safety's sake too, and helping her to get out of the messes that she gets into.
Deborah, why did you want to include friendship in your series?
I think friendship is a great motivator for doing things, to help your friends. It also gives people something to rely on. It will, Maggie needs sometimes somebody to stand up and say, "Are you kidding me? Why are you doing that?" So she gets that from Sally, because Sally is very different from Maggie. Sally is involved in everything in the community. She's very outgoing. Maggie's more step back and does her own thing, and she likes to garden solitary. She likes to write. She likes to do these other things. So they're kind of a contrast, and her friendship with Sally can bring things out in her that she normally wouldn't have.
It's a wonderful way of looking at it. Before we have just a few minutes left, but I do have a question for Deborah. I love your gardening pieces on your website. What is the most common question you get asked as a master gardener?
Usually it's, why did my plants die? So I will sit back and go, well, did you water it? Did you water it too much? Is it getting enough sunlight? So you go down the whole list of things that should be really simple, but they're very easy to neglect. Or people ask, can I grow whatever here? Um, because I tried to grow it and it just died. So there's a lot of listening to people and what they want to do, and then maybe stepping back and doing some research to find the answer to their question.
It's kind of like solving a mystery, isn't it?
It can be, very much can be.
For my next question, you can say as much or as little as you like, because I know with some authors it's kind of a protective area, but what's coming next from you as a writer, Deborah?
Um, continuing to write the gardening articles. Those are on a pretty regular schedule. I also am working on the second book, which is going to be called tentatively The Gardener's Cat. Not a very clever title, but it introduces a cat into Maggie's life who gets her entwined in another mystery.
Well, I'm already ready to read it, so write fast is all I can say. Any expectation it's in the works is all we can say.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I can say at this point. I'm not entirely satisfied with the way the plot turns, so I've got a little work to do on that.
Celeste, can we expect more Lady Petra?
We can. I've got a contract for 2 more books.
Oh,
And
great.
so, yes, so book 3 is tentatively titled Revenge Served Royal, is set at Windsor Castle. And there is sort of a Great British Bake Off theme. There is a Regency Bake Off held at Windsor Castle, and Lady Petra gets to be a judge, and there's some scandal that happens, and it was a blast to write. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then book 4, I don't quite know where it's going to be set yet, but I'm tentatively thinking Bath, in England, and so that's what's coming next for me.
How can readers learn more about you and your books? Are you on social media, Celeste?
I am, yes. I'm most active on Instagram, and I'm Celeste Connally author on Instagram. And I have a website, celesteconnally.com. And I'm trying to get back into Blue Sky. Well, or I just got on it, but it was sort of like Twitter, and so I'm looking forward to that. But I'm most active on Instagram and a little bit on Facebook as well.
Deborah?
I have an author page on Facebook under my name, Deborah J. Benoit. Um, I also am on Blue Sky, Instagram, Twitter, which I don't post on a lot, but I've been trying to get into the social media promotions. Um, let's see, Instagram and anywhere I could think of to post. They're all under my own name. And I have the website penpaperplant.com.
Well, I can't believe how quickly our time has flown by. We've been very fortunate at the Poison Pen to have with us virtually authors Deborah Benoit,
Benoit.
Benoit, and Celeste Conley, who are sharing information and interesting tidbits about their new book. In Deborah's case, it's The Gardener's Plot. Celeste's new book is All's Fair in Love and Treachery. You can find them at the Poison Pen or your local independent bookstore, or check your public library if your funds are limited. They should be there as well. I'd like to thank Deborah and Celeste for sharing their time with us today. And for those tuning in, thank you for joining us for another virtual event with the Poison Pen Bookstore.